Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Go Big or Go Home. I am Old Man Troy, joined by probably the subdued youngster Kevin Cunningham after Ohio State lost this weekend. I had to say it, youngster. I just had to say it. I'm sorry. How are you doing today, though?
Doing fine. Ohio State lost, and they have 2 losses, which means they're screwed. Ohio State.
That's putting it bluntly. That's being very blunt.
Yeah, Ohio State 2 losses, Penn State 2 losses, Michigan.
Are they screwed too?
Well, if you have 2 losses, you're screwed. That's
all right.
That's the way the cookie crumbles.
I'm being very sarcastic today, and you know why. So you're going to have to put up with it for an hour, hour and a half, however long we decide to make this show today. You're just going to have to deal with my little, and I'm not even going to call it cute sarcasm. I'm going to call it arrogant sarcasm. That's what I'm going to call it today. That's the kind of mood I am in already 2 minutes into the show. But I'll let you continue.
Well, I just had to say that Ohio State 2 losses, they're screwed. I wanted to start this podcast off with the truth and what had happened last week. And obviously we will get into every single Big Ten game that took place last week. We will preview what will take place on November the 11th, I believe is the date for it. Yes, it is. So essentially we'll go over everything, but Penn State, now 2 losses. Ohio State, now 2 losses. Basically everyone in the Big Ten has at least 2 losses, except for one team, and that is Wisconsin. And Wisconsin just keeps winning, and they're 9-0, and they're in the Big Ten. And we talked about it on this show before the year started. I thought it's the best league in college football at the moment, and I don't necessarily think that's changed at all. But it has to be said that Wisconsin's 9-0, and they're number 8 in the country, in arguably the best league in the college football. So essentially, you've got Michigan State at 12. You've got Ohio State.
Fired Antonio! Fired Antonio! That's what the boosters wanted. Sorry.
Yeah.
It's on the tip of my tongue. It still irks me. I still go back to that podcast we did. How can you be so silly as to want to fire this guy? He's a very good coach. And look what he's doing. He's now set up, and we're going to preview this game later. He's now set up right there for the taking to have first place in the division. It's all set up for him. And just, 2 months before, Kevin, they wanted to fire him. They wanted him out of there. They thought the grass was greener on the other side. Well, I think they're over-exceeding. But, hey, just get on that magic carpet and keep riding, because that's what it is this year, a magic carpet ride for Michigan State. I thought they'd be pretty good, but you and I both said they've got a darn tough schedule. And they're knocking every critic right in the nose. They're punching them right in the nose, Kevin, and saying, take that, take that, take that, take that. This is like a little boxer, kind of like Floyd Mayweather. These little jabs right here. Bam, 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 take that, take that. But I'm going to be sarcastic about it. People wanted him fired 2 months ago. And so, all those people, I guess I get this way. If you were one of those people that thought D'Antonio should be fired, don't even cheer for your Michigan State Spartans. Don't even cheer for him, because apparently he's a bad coach. So don't even cheer for him. That's how I feel. I always feel that way when people jump off the bandwagon and say things like that are just silly. So now if you were one of those people that said, fire D'Antonio, and I don't care if you dislike me for being this brutally honest about it, but if you said that D'Antonio should have been fired, you should not cheer for your team right now, because look what he's done. That's all I got.
Yeah, you basically have to shut up. I think you can keep cheering for your team, but you, as a fan, if you're calling out your star quarterback or just your quarterback in general, obviously you don't think he's a star at the time if you're calling him out and thinking he's garbage, you need to get rid of him. But if you're calling out one of your players, one of your coaches, then, I mean, going forward, once they prove you wrong, it's kind of like, well, you really have to second-guess yourself if you doubted Mark D'Antonio. If you doubted the Pittsburgh Steelers and Ben Roethlisberger, for example, not to say that Big Ben is, now playing.
Are you bringing up things, youngster, that you and I said just don't fret? Just ride the course? Because that's what I'm hearing there, because those are two things that we talked about. Big Ben's not done, and don't fire D'Antonio. We discussed both of those things. And we're not even – here's the thing. We're not even fans of Michigan State. And I guess I live in the Pittsburgh area, but I'm from Green Bay. I mean, I cheer for the Steelers because they're in the town that I live in now, and I want them to do well. But I'm not a, true Steeler fan in the sense that I grew up a Steeler fan, nor am I a Michigan State fan. I'm a Badger fan. But you and I talked about it, the other side of the coin, when things weren't so good. We gave every reason as to why you should ride the course with those two people you just mentioned. And, boy, we just seem to be right on that one, youngster.
Yeah, we're right on certain things. Mark D'Antonio is one of them. I think Big Ben, the Steelers in general, is another. I think our locks of the week, Troy. We are 3-0 in our locks of the week. We did not take any last week. So, therefore, we did not lose any of our locks of the week. We are still perfect on this show. If you are a betting man, betting woman, betting child, probably not a betting child. I guess I shouldn't say that. Although, of course, if you are a child.
Yeah, I hope there's no betting children listening to this show, because if you are, it is illegal. I will say that. I'm now being the sheriff. And that is illegal.
I'll say this, though, that I partook in my fair share of March Madness brackets when I was under the age of 21. That's for sure. That involved money. But regardless, if you want to call the cops on me for that, feel free. But in any case, if you are a betting person, betting human being, or if you have an animal that wants to bet and make some money that way, check out our locks of the week for the past few weeks. We're 3-0, and it's something new that we kind of adopted on this show, and we'll see if we have any for this week. But I will get into
the rest. Do not, though, youngster, if it's only the old man lock, do not take that.
Right.
Do not take the old man lock. That is not that's not good sound betting practice. Now, if we both agree and it is the go big or go home lock, take it. But if it's the old man lock, do not take it. Go the opposite way. If the old man says, yes, do it, then don't do it. That's all. I mean, it's the truth.
Yeah. You would make money going against your locks of the week for this point. But us as a tandem, we are perfect. You are 100% guaranteed to make money with our locks of the week, at least not in the future, but at least in the past. You have a 100% chance of winning money. Anyway.
I hope you did not jinx us. I hope you did not jinx our lock of the week.
No, of course not. Of course not. I will say this. Wisconsin, number 8, Michigan State, 12, Ohio State, 13, Penn State, 14. Again, 4 Big Ten teams in the top 14 in the country, 3 of them with 2 losses, still in the top 14, back to back to back. I think that speaks to how good the Big Ten is from, you can't say top to bottom because the bottom of every conference is garbage, realistically. But the middle tier, those Michigan States, those Iowas, they proved they can hang with the big boys, the Ohio States, the Penn States. They proved that this past weekend. But so you got 4 of the top 14. You also have Iowa at 20. You also have Northwestern at 25. There's a lot of Big Ten teams in there, 5 of the top 20, 6 of the top 25, 4 of the top 14. However you want to look at it, there's a lot of good Big Ten teams. Basically, whenever the College Football Playoff Committee talks about the Big Ten and talks about Wisconsin, it's like, well, this team's really good. They just haven't played anyone. They're 9-0. We know that, but they're not in the same caliber as Georgia and Alabama, at least how they look from the eye test. And I understand that. And I fully 100% believe in eye test type stuff when kind of assessing teams. So, yeah, I agree. Miami at 8-0, they're number 7 in the country. Wisconsin, 9-0, number 8 in the country. They don't belong with Georgia and Alabama. I believe that wholeheartedly. I understand why one-loss teams are ahead of them. I get it. So I don't think everything has to go by record, so to say. But I think Wisconsin's a pretty good team. They just keep winning. As long as they keep winning, they will keep moving up because teams ahead of them will lose, like Oklahoma playing TCU. One of them will lose. Miami, Notre Dame, one of them will lose. Clemson, As long as they keep trucking along, they're going to have decently hard games, even though their schedule is fairly cupcake-ish. You still have to play those mid-tier programs like the Iowas that we talked about. And on any given Saturday, a Clemson can even lose to a Syracuse. That happened earlier this year. So it's not – you can't, in my opinion, at least you look now, it's 9-0 Wisconsin at number 8. But you have some of these teams ahead of them that have to play each other. Georgia, Alabama will almost undoubtedly play each other. Whether that frees up a spot or not, who knows? We'll find that out in the final installation of the rankings. But I think personally, as long as Wisconsin keeps winning and they go into the Big Ten championship undefeated and they beat an Ohio State, Penn State, assuming one of those two teams still has 2 losses. If they're playing a 3-loss team at that point, then maybe it doesn't really vault them too much. And you can say, hey, this team's from the Big Ten. Hey, they're undefeated, but they played nobody. I get that, but I still think Michigan's going to creep into the top 25. By the time next week rolls around and Wisconsin can beat them, Wisconsin plays. Who does Wisconsin play this week? Let me see here.
They play Iowa.
Yeah, and Iowa's number 20. That's going to be a top 25 win. I think Wisconsin's got a solid amount of decent games left, and then you're going to have Penn State, Ohio State, most likely, one of those two to close it. So I think a 13-0 Wisconsin from the Big Ten with all these good teams. Yes, their schedule is light, but by the end of it, you're going to have beaten Iowa. You're going to have beaten Michigan. You're going to have beaten an Ohio State, a Penn State. That's if they keep winning. As long as that happens, I do think Wisconsin makes the Final Four. Not necessarily.
I'm going to correct you there, Kevin. I don't think they beat Ohio State. I don't think Wisconsin, that even though that defense plays well, if it's Ohio State in the championship game against Wisconsin, I'm not going to say it's going to be a blowout, but we talked about it last week on the show. That Ohio State offense. Now, granted, I know this last weekend didn't look so good against Iowa, but I will even go this way. Every team has a bad day. And again, they had to go on the road. Playing on the road in the Big Ten is no easy task. However, that championship game is a neutral site. I don't think Wisconsin gets by Ohio State. I think they can handle Penn State, honestly, based on the way that they play defense. But I think the way that Barrett's been playing, I don't think they can get by Ohio State. I think they can beat Michigan State. I think they can beat Penn State. But I don't think that they can beat Ohio State, Kevin. That's my quick thought there.
I'll say this, that if Wisconsin played Ohio State or Penn State this week, I would favor Ohio State, Penn State. My feelings have not changed from last week to this week. In as far as, I guess, which teams are better of those three, I still think Ohio State's probably the best of the three. I think Penn State's second. I think Wisconsin's third. I think that Penn State lost a 3-point game to a solid Michigan State team that can play defense and that has a young, energetic team who just is seemingly stepping up and playing their butts off when they absolutely need to. I don't think that's an atrocious loss. The College Football Playoff Committee obviously doesn't if they have Michigan State as the number 12 team in the country. So I think Penn State's still really good. I think they had a down game. I think they completely collapsed basically against Ohio State and couldn't hold an 18-point lead 2 separate times in that game on the road in Columbus. I still think Penn State's really good. I still think Ohio State's really good. I think last week proved to me that Ohio State isn't the best team in the country. I don't think they would beat a Georgia, Alabama, but I think that Ohio State's still a really good team at the end of the day. So, for me personally, I don't think Wisconsin wins out. I don't think they enter the last college football playoff rankings unbeaten and have beaten the Penn State or Ohio State. I think they are better than Michigan State. I do think that. But last week didn't change anything for me as far as those three teams go. It just proved to me, and like I said a week ago, that against Iowa, that's the game that really would prove to me how good Ohio State is. Because Ohio State can beat Penn State, but the week after, the mental aspect of it. How do they respond on the road against a good Iowa team? Not a great one, that's for sure, but a good team on the road after a huge high. How do they respond? If they go out and beat Iowa by 17 points, I'm all in on Ohio State. They didn't. Obviously, they got crushed. But it was 17-17, and then they give up, 24, 28, 31, however many unanswered points, and Iowa crushes them. So that, to me, just proved Ohio State probably isn't the best team in the country, but I still think Ohio State, Penn State are really good. I think Michigan State's solid. I think Iowa's solid. I think Northwestern's interesting, I guess. Just talking about the top 25 teams, but last week, I guess, to me, didn't change anything as far as how I view necessarily both, realistically, Penn State and Wisconsin. It just proved to me that Ohio State's not probably, so to say, the front runner to me. I think if Ohio State would have blown out Iowa on the road after that huge win against Penn State, that would have really said something to me, and I would favor them to go forward and win the whole thing. But that didn't happen. I just think if Wisconsin keeps winning, I think that you can't leave out the Big Ten winner that goes 13-0, beats a Penn State, Ohio State at the end of the year, beats an Iowa, beats a Michigan, and just cruises while all these one-loss teams are ahead of them. I just don't see Wisconsin not making the Final Four if they are 13-0.
Well, I'll give you the scenario where it happens that way, Kevin. So you look at the teams right now. You've got ahead of Wisconsin, you have Oklahoma, yes. TCU, yes.
Yep.
And so you have Miami of Ohio, right? Or Miami of Ohio. Gee whiz. Miami undefeated right behind Wisconsin. They play Notre Dame this week. If they beat Notre Dame, you can't keep that undefeated team out of the top four, because now I guess you could, but in either case, no matter, even if Wisconsin beats Iowa, you're going to move Miami ahead of Wisconsin because they beat Notre Dame. Now,
and Miami's already ahead of Wisconsin. They're number 7 right now.
Okay, so Miami's ahead of them. So you're going to move them up. You're going to move, I guess the poll I looked at, I don't know what the poll was that I looked at. I thought they were behind them. Oh, well, maybe my eyes are bad. So when you look at that, though, so if they beat Notre Dame, they're moving into the top 4. And so maybe Wisconsin moves up one more spot. Then you have a Clemson-Miami game. So if Clemson wins, it depends on how they move these teams. If Clemson and Miami play and Clemson beats Miami, okay, it's one loss, but it's against Clemson, is the committee going to say, well, that loss is going to drop you below Wisconsin? I'm not so sure, because now you might be talking about 3 versus 4 if you're talking ACC championship game, and assume both teams win all the way to the end. So the other factor in here is you got Oklahoma and TCU. They may end up playing in the Big 12 championship game. One of them is going to win, assuming they both win out. And if TCU or Oklahoma win, how do you move Wisconsin ahead of them? Because they're playing opponents that are ranked. And there's where I go with this, Kevin. Things, even if the chips fell into place and Wisconsin was undefeated, a lot rides, to me, on this Miami-Notre Dame game. Notre Dame needs to win if you're a Badger fan. They need to maintain that, and then Notre Dame's got to lose somewhere else down the road. Because if Miami wins and they vault up, okay, you're gonna push Notre Dame back, but then you have Miami versus Clemson in the ACC title game. And I don't see the committee, if Clemson wins that game, now you have a Miami team with one loss. It's even with the chips falling into place, Kevin, I could see Wisconsin being undefeated and not making the playoff. I really could, just based on everything else that's fallen into place ahead of them. And that's all on the committee. And am I saying they have it out for Wisconsin? No, because as a realistic person, Wisconsin, like you said, is not in the class of Georgia. They're not in the class of Alabama. Now, are they in the class of a Notre Dame, a Clemson, a Miami? Yes. But when these other teams are playing top 5 teams, top 6 teams, and Wisconsin's playing number 20, number 12, and they're winning, it's not the same resume as these other teams. And maybe the committee will say, well, hey, Wisconsin, you had a good run there at the end. You beat some ranked teams, but they weren't in the top 10. So too bad for you, Wisconsin. This is the way it's going to roll out. That's my scenario. That's my thought. And I think it's a realistic thought. Again, it's a lot of what-ifs, but these teams are playing each other that are ranked ahead of Wisconsin, Kevin. And if that Miami team beats Notre Dame and stays unbeaten, you have to move them. You almost have to move them into the top 4 because they've beaten a playoff team, and then you move Clemson up. And if Miami loses, will they drop them that far? Will Oklahoma, if they beat TCU, then slide into that 4 spot? I mean, there's a lot of moving parts here, but I was looking at it and saying, man, Wisconsin could not make the playoff even going undefeated. What are your quick thoughts there on what I just said?
I think it's, I guess, possible if all the wrong things happen. To me, though, realistically, it could come down to Georgia, Alabama, number 1, number 2, undefeated. And once one of those teams loses, obviously one will the loser be out of the top 4? I think that might be kind of the nail in the coffin for Wisconsin.
Never, Kevin. That loser's not dropping out of the playoffs. They're pretty much locked. Unless something crazy would happen before they get to that championship game and one of them has a loss, and they'd have to have loss number 2. If they play each other and it's the winner is undefeated, the loser has 1 loss, they don't drop that team out of the top 4. No way. Unless it's a total shellacking. Unless it's like a 35-point blowout. And even then, I'm not so sure that the committee drops either one of them out of the top 4. Just the way things are rolling out.
I think they could. I think they could because you have all these other one-loss teams who have won so many games in a row. If it is a Notre Dame, if it is a Clemson, Oklahoma, TCU, Miami could be undefeated at that point. Wisconsin undefeated. I don't know. I don't know if you take away a one-loss team who has won, say, 9 straight, over a Georgia, Alabama who loses the final game. That's the last game you see, and it's a loss compared to Wisconsin winning 13 straight. I find it hard, but I think that could be the difference maker because I think even if one of those 2 teams doesn't make the college football playoff, let's say Georgia is the one who wins out and Alabama is the one who loses, they get kicked out to number 6, let's just say randomly. So you've got Georgia. I think if Notre Dame wins out, obviously they can and they would stay in the top 4. I think if Clemson were to win out, they would stay in the top 4. If Oklahoma or TCU were to win out, they would stay in the top 4. Miami, if they won out, would stay in the top 4. It's just you're going to see Oklahoma, TCU, one of those fall out. They would have 2 losses. They'll be done. I mean, this week, Oklahoma, TCU, one of those teams just completely done, in my opinion, because they would have 2 losses. And I think Wisconsin undefeated would trump any 2-loss, Big 12 winner at that point, at worst case scenario. But so, to me, I guess if you have a Georgia undefeated all the way through, obviously they're in. Notre Dame undefeated all the way through. Clemson, to go the rest of the distance and not lose. I can see it happening, I guess. It's just I find it very hard to think that Clemson's going to run the table and Notre Dame's going to run the table and Georgia's going to run the table and Alabama and, Oklahoma TCU winner. It just all basically has to go perfectly wrong for Wisconsin, in my opinion. Again, unless maybe Georgia, Alabama, like you said, you don't think there's any way in heck that one of those 2 teams, and I fully expect them to be undefeated playing each other at the end of the year, number 1, number 2, you think that the loser of that stays in the top 4. I don't. I guess that's probably the difference maker. I think that very well could be the difference as to whether a Wisconsin at 13-0 would make it. Obviously, if they lose, then, no Big Ten teams in there. But I think Wisconsin has a very good shot in making the college football playoff if they're 13-0. Do you think, Troy, that if everything fell perfectly for a Michigan State, Ohio State, or Penn State, that any of those four or any of those three could make it, and their last win is over an undefeated Wisconsin the last week? And if, all the chips fall perfectly for them, do you think any of those teams, any of these two-loss teams, have any shot at being in the Final Four?
No. Simple
Yeah.
no. I mean, you mentioned at the beginning of the show they're screwed. And the reason they're screwed is you have to take a look at the top 10. I'm sitting here talking about Wisconsin possibly being undefeated and not making the playoff. You have to look where Ohio State and Penn State are now sitting in this poll. I mean, there would have to be – I shouldn't say nothing is impossible. I mean, if there was a major upset, if TCU loses another game, if Oklahoma loses another game, I mean, those are things that would have to happen. And if you're talking about falling perfectly into place, they would have to win out, and you'd have to hope that these other teams get upset, and it's just tough. We're at a point, I know, and people point, and you may even point to, well, look what Iowa did to Ohio State. But you and I even talked about it last week, Kevin, that we could see Iowa staying in that game because Ohio State goes into that game thinking, man, we're on top of the world. We'll just show up at Kinnick Stadium and we'll beat Iowa. And that's what happened. I'm not saying I'm in their mind, and that's exactly what happened, but from a fan's perspective, that's what happened. They went into that game, and I'm not saying they weren't prepared. I'm not saying they didn't practice. I was a student athlete at one time, as were you. And when you get a big win like that and you feel invincible, I'm not saying you don't go practice. You prepare. But your mindset at the beginning of the game is like, yeah, we're good. We're going to beat this team. And you have to have a confidence, but sometimes too much confidence is a killer. And that's what happened to Ohio State. You and I talked about it last week, that we could see this happening. So, again, put another notch on what the old man and youngster talk about and go back and listen, because we talked about the exact thing that happened, Kevin, that we were concerned what Ohio State team is going to show up. The one that can go in there and dominate, or the one that's going to have a hangover from beating a very good Penn State team. And that's what happened. So to answer your question, to circle back, I don't see it happening. They got 2 losses. They're done. There's too much in front of them at this point, even if they beat an undefeated Wisconsin team. So if Ohio State beats Michigan State, wins out, gets to the championship game, beats Wisconsin, they would have to have so many different things happen. Again, you got a Miami team that's undefeated in here also. You've got a TCU and Oklahoma team. You've got teams in front of them, and the numbers just won't add up for it to happen, Kevin.
Yeah, everything has to go perfect, a.k.a. it's not going to happen. I mean, until I see a 2-loss team in the Final Four, I just don't think it's going to happen. So prove me wrong. That's my stance on certain things in life and in sports. To me, I had to see Brett Hundley beat the Detroit Lions defense and a better quarterback in Matt Stafford in a night game where Detroit would obviously show up. I was not going to favor Green Bay, even in Green Bay, even a Monday night game. I had to see Brett Hundley beat a better defense, better quarterback in a big-time game because it's Monday night. I had to see that for me to say, yeah, I think Brett Hundley and the Packers would beat the Lions. No way. I do a NFL show, a little stint, 10 to 15 minutes for actually a Canadian radio station every Monday. And I said, there's no way I can, put money on or pick Green Bay, Brett Hundley in that Monday night game. To me, they have to prove it to me first before I pick Brett Hundley to beat, again, a better defense, better QB under, a big audience. To me, it had to be proven. And so to me, for the college football playoff, finally, to get back to it, a 2-loss team has to prove it to me that they can even sniff the Final Four, because there's just so many undefeated teams, so many 1-loss teams, I should say, not so many undefeated teams. There's usually 1 or 2 And then you've got, these 6 or 7 really good Power 5 one-loss teams sitting there at the end. One team always gets quote-unquote screwed, and it's like, oh, my God, how is the number 5 team not in there in the Final Four, because this team lost to that team, da-da-da-da-da. There's always the talk afterwards that, oh, my God, how is number 5 or number 6 where they are? How are they not in the Final Four? Regardless, to me, if you have 2 losses and you're in serious contention in the Final Four, that's surprising to me. And so for a 2-loss team to make it, even if all the dominoes, fall perfect, it just seems nearly impossible to me. I have to see it first before I would say, yeah, I think Michigan State can still make it. Ohio State, Penn State, I don't. Like I said to start the show, as an Ohio State fan, I think they're screwed. That simple. Even though they can beat Michigan State this week, they can crush them by 30. Absolutely, I think Ohio State can crush Michigan State by 30 points this week. And yet, they would go up to 10, 9, and you still have undefeated teams ahead of them, at least 3, I'm sure, still ahead of them, with, another 5 one-loss teams still ahead of them. So it's just even after that, and even after beating maybe a ranked Michigan, which at that point they probably wouldn't because Wisconsin would knock them out of the top 25 again. So just everything has to fall perfect, and I don't think that happens. I have to see a 2-loss team get into the college football playoff before I say, yeah, I think, that can absolutely happen. I don't think it can. I have nothing more on these rankings, Troy, except for, again, I just read the stat that the Big Ten had 6 teams ranked, that I had mentioned. In the top 25 this week. That's the most in college football playoff history since they've been doing this. Again, it's only been since 2014, but no conference has had 6 teams ranked in it in a given week since these rankings have come out. So again, I still think the Big Ten is the best league in college football, even though they may not have a single representative in the college football playoff this year. I think the depth at the top, in the middle, just shows how good a lot of these teams are, and how on any given Saturday, a middle-of-the-road team like Iowa can beat an Ohio State by 30 points. It's not something I would have even thought was possible, but they did it last week. So that's, I guess, my final comment on these rankings. Unless you've got anything else, Troy, I guess we can move on to recap.
I do. I just want to confirm what you said about the Big Ten being the best conference in college football. This proves it. I know you're probably, like I said, a little subdued about the loss, but that middle-of-the-pack team, and that's what Michigan State, even though they're in first place, they're a middle-of-the-pack talent-wise team in the Big Ten. Again, on a magic carpet ride. Good for them. But when we've discussed the Big Ten, we've talked about the teams at the top, and I even teeter with Wisconsin on the line of being a great team in the Big Ten. Yeah, they're undefeated, but offensively they're limited. So I put them and rank them below the Ohio States and the Penn States, but they're at the top, and their division isn't the strongest. They didn't have Ohio State. They didn't have Penn State on the schedule. And so at that point, when you look at it, you've got those top teams. But the middle-of-the-pack teams, it's tough to go on the road in college football, and I'm not just saying the Big Ten, but it's extremely difficult in the Big Ten to go on the road and win with all the rivalries and the depth of that middle. Those middle teams can pull those upsets, and we've talked about it, the Northwesterns, the Michigan State, the Iowas. We've talked about those teams having that capability even though they're not a great team. And that's what makes the Big Ten so great, is that outside of a few teams in Illinois and Indiana are Rutgers, and, nothing against Rutgers. They've gotten a few wins, but those are not the dominating teams. I mean, you look at those teams, they're probably not the Rutgers, Illinois, Indiana's not probably going to beat an Ohio State. And so at that point, you look at it and say, man, that Big Ten is pretty darn deep. And I agree with you. It's showing in the rankings that top to bottom, and even, the teams at the bottom, Illinois plays teams tough for a while, and they're going to be good in a few years. But, yeah, the Big Ten, to me, is the most dominant, and I'll say it that way, they are the most dominant conference because they got teams in the middle that are 5 or 6 when you go down the rankings that could pull an upset against one of the top teams. That's all I have.
You can make the case, in my opinion, that you've got 7 teams in the Big Ten this year that if they beat an Alabama and Georgia, it would be surprising, obviously, especially Northwestern. I think they're the 7th. I would put Michigan ahead of Northwestern realistically if I had to just, match them up in terms of power rankings. But Northwestern, number 25 in the country, I think it's possible for the number 25 team to beat the number 1 team on any given year, no matter the team. I think it's possible. I don't think it's likely whatsoever. I think there is a big gap between number 1 and 25 in college football, but I think Northwestern, if everything played out perfectly, I think they could beat the number 1 team in the country. I think Michigan could. They're not even ranked. I think they could beat Alabama, Georgia. I don't think it happens more than once out of 10, probably, but I think it's possible. You can't say that for Rutgers, Illinois, Purdue at this point, that they would win 1 out of 10 times against the number 1 team in the country. But I think 7 teams in the Big Ten could make that case that, hey, yes, it's possible that we can at least beat the number 1 team in the country. I don't think there's any other conference that has 7 teams that can say, we can beat Georgia, we can beat, whoever the number 1 team in the country is this year. We'll find out at the end. But that just goes to show even the middle, those put Wisconsin in there or not, you've got Michigan, you've got Northwestern, you've got Iowa, you've got Michigan State, just talent-wise, middle-tier programs, and they're in the top 25. They're upsetting Ohio State by 30 points. It shows the power of the Big Ten. With that, I'll move on to recapping November 4th games, Week 10 games. We're moving on to Week 11 in the college football season. But in Week 10, I guess we can start with this, that Iowa at home, again, it was 17-17 at one point. And I don't have the number in front of me. I keep forgetting to look it up. But Iowa went on like a 24-28, 31-point run, basically to end the game, and they end up beating Ohio State by 31 points. Nathan Stanley, the Iowa quarterback, throws for 5 touchdowns. J.T. Barrett threw, I think it was 2 or 3 interceptions. Ohio State still scored 24 points, and realistically, I think if you would have told me Ohio State scores 24 points in this game going into it, I think I would have said, if Ohio State only scores 24, I still think they win. I think it's very close, but I still think they win. I don't think Iowa scored 55 on them. I think it was the worst loss that Urban Meyer has had potentially in his coaching career at the D1 level. That might be incorrect, but there was some stat I saw where since taking over Utah, Florida, Ohio State, maybe the team that he had, I think it was Bowling Green. I forgot exactly what team it was that he had before Utah. I think it was his worst loss ever as a coach at the D1 level. So losing by 31 points to Iowa, I mean, Troy, did you think that was even possible going into last week?
No, I didn't think that would happen whatsoever. I mean, I thought there might be a letdown and that Iowa could hang in this game, and if I was going to win, it might have been by a touchdown or a field goal because Ohio State had that letdown. I did not see this coming. But they always say when the avalanche starts, it's hard to stop. And that's what happened to Ohio State. They started going downhill like one of those little snowballs, and it turned into, one of those big boulders by the time it got to the bottom of the hill because they couldn't stop it, and Iowa just kept playing with the momentum. And that's what happens in the Big Ten when you go on the road. And they weren't prepared to play. And by the time Ohio State, and I don't think they ever got into the game, by the time they realized what was going on, they were already so far behind, and they had, Iowa's cleats embedded in their chest and in their gut from getting kicked so much. And Iowa just never took their foot off the gas. They just kept going and going and going. But I never saw the 30-point win. I thought Iowa, again, things falling into place, it was going to take a valiant effort, and man, it was just amazing that it happened that way. So, I mean, I know your thoughts there, but man, Iowa just kept it going. They every opportunity they capitalized on, and that's what happens sometimes in college football. That's why I love college football so much. Things like this happen. Again, I know you're an Ohio State fan, but seeing an Iowa do those type things, that's why I love college football, because really, you brought it up before, on any given Saturday, one of these middle-of-the-pack teams can take down, it's like David and Goliath. That's what happened, and this is exactly what happened in Iowa, Ohio State. It happened. And those are the reasons I love college football, because it does happen. And it happens more often than not, Kevin.
Yeah, for sure. It was funny. I thought originally J.T. Barrett had 3 interceptions, and I said a minute ago, 3 interceptions, 2 interceptions, whatever it was, he threw 4 in this game. 3 touchdowns, 4 interceptions for J.T. Barrett. Only completes 18 passes. And Iowa's quarterback, again, 5 touchdowns. We saw it week 1 against Ohio State's young secondary that was replacing all those first-rounders from a year ago, 3 of them. And you saw Indiana be able to throw the ball and score points. They had 21 points, I think, by the end of the first half, week 1. And you knew Ohio State would gain experience. They would get better, whatever. But Iowa, to throw 5 touchdowns on them and score 55 points, it's just nobody could have seen this coming. I knew Akrum Wadley, Iowa's running back. I knew he was good. I knew James Butler, the transfer from Nevada. I know he was good. But, those 2 combined had 192 yards on the ground. That says something. But for the quarterback, Nathan Stanley, to throw 5 touchdown passes in this game.
Nathan who? Nathan who?
Anyone who's not a...
Yeah, think about this, Kevin. Anybody listening to this podcast, unless you're an Iowa fan, and maybe a true Big Ten fan, or you follow the Big Ten like Kevin and I do, you know these names. But if you're a casual fan of any team in the Big Ten, do you really know the names that Kevin just mentioned? The answer is no. Who in the heck are these guys? Yeah. And I don't want anybody to say, oh, yeah, I knew that Nathan Stanley. No, you did not. Don't even try to pull that one over on me. We know of these guys, Kevin, because we follow the Big Ten. We do a Big Ten show every week. We know these guys are capable. But anybody outside of Iowa, they don't know these guys from squat. And look what they did against a good Ohio State defense.
Yeah. For me, I work, a healthy houred part-time job with Land of 10 and doing, Big Ten stuff constantly whenever I'm at work, obviously, for them. And so I know James Butler, the transfer from Nevada, senior running back, backup to Akrum Wadley at Iowa. I know they've got a dynamic duo at running back, but that takes someone who literally works on reporting in the Big Ten to know Iowa's 1-2 punch at running back. But so, yeah, Nathan Stanley, not many people know that name. And to think that he would throw 5 touchdowns against Ohio State, you just would not think it's possible. But just in general with this game, it's a shocker for how it turned out. There's no other way to really say it. First downs, Iowa has 4 more first downs. Passing totals, basically the same. Rushing, Iowa outgained them by 80. But it doesn't really speak to a 31-point blowout. Third downs, Ohio State completed 40% of them. And they actually did a better job. I guess Iowa had barely a better percentage on third downs. Ohio State goes 1 for 1 on fourth. Iowa goes 1 for 2. You just wonder how it happens that Iowa wins by 31 points, and you look at the stats, and it's like, well, how does this happen? And you look finally at turnovers, and Iowa has none. Ohio State has 4.
There's your difference right there.
There you go.
Short
there
field.
It is. Yep.
And at Iowa, I talked about the momentum before. You get a turnover at home, and it's almost like 2 turnovers. It really is, because now you got all the fans into it. And I know people will say, well, good teams can win under adversity. Well, when you turn the ball over 4 times, I don't care who you are. It's going to be hard to win. Now, should it have been a 30-point game? I guess it's a podcast, so I can say hell no. Hell no, it shouldn't have been 30 points. Ohio State's better than that. But like I said, where they were in this game coming into it, and I've been in games like this, Kevin, where coming off a big win as an athlete, you feel like you're invincible. And so, you practice, and I know I'm repeating myself from earlier in the show, but it's relevant that you go out and practice, but you practice differently. And what I mean by that is you're practicing with that arrogant confidence like, we're really good. We're really good. And it's going to take a perfect game for some. No, it takes for you to screw up. And another team, because you now have a bullseye on your back, and by the time you realize that, you can't flip the switch in the game. I've been part of those games, and it's tough. And you got to fight and claw back. But what happens is the other team has gained a lead, gained momentum. They're not letting down. They're going to keep going. And so now you're back up to par, but it's too late. And I've been there before, like I said, and that's why I wanted to bring it up once again. I've been there a number of times. So to see that big win, though, man, that was shocking to me.
Yeah, I'll finalize it with this, that I think that from the neck up and what's going on in your head matters a lot more than what people think in terms of sports and what goes on in a single game. Like you, I mean, playing sports growing up, I was a basketball kid, and just in general in South Florida, I mean, you've got these travel teams for basketball who it's their lives, and you've got these teams that just basically dominate. And so for travel basketball, I mean, my travel basketball team was very average, below average. And so we would go to these tournaments, and I knew before the ball was even tipped, just looking at warm-ups, that we would lose by 20-plus points. I could tell, and I knew it from mentally. And so that going into the game with that kind of mentality, and not to say that it's the same as being lackluster because you know you're so much better, but I'll get to that in a second, but just knowing that we're going to lose by 20-plus points before the ball's even tipped, before I even know anything about any of the players on the other team, just by watching warm-ups, I could tell that we were going to get killed. That's just the reality of it. I just knew. And so that, I mean, there's no chance that we had to win the game, whether, I thought so or not, but just from the mentality of me going into it, I guess what the effort that I put into the game and confidence and believing in myself and believing in my team that we could win, it just wasn't there. But so on the flip side of it, in recreational leagues, your summer leagues, winter, spring, South Florida, you've got, throughout the year, you've got 4 different leagues going on basically year-round for basketball. And for recreational leagues, I mean, my team we would win a championship basically every other year. And we would redraft and, try and make the teams as fair as possible before the league starts, before the season starts. But my team typically would be in the championship game every other year. And so after we beat a really good team with a really good record, and then we go and play a 2-6 team the next week or the next game, I mean, my focus, my effort just was not there. It was not the same. Even though I knew we were better, and Ohio State knows they're better, the College Football Playoff Committee, after a 31-point loss, still thinks Ohio State's easily better than Iowa. Number 13 versus number 20. Ohio State would still be favored to win the game probably by Vegas this week if the two teams played. College Football Playoff Committee says so after a 31-point loss. But your mentality, your effort, what you bring into the game, you're just kind of basically half-assing it. And not to say that you're giving 50%, but 70, 80 maybe. You just don't have that fire under you, and Ohio State didn't have that fire. If they were playing with that fire, you would have seen what they did to Penn State. And outside of the atrocious start that they had, the unlucky start that they had with a kickoff return, a fumble, and being down 14-0 in the first 3 minutes of the game, take that out, and we talked about it a week ago on the show, Ohio State dominated Penn State from that point on. But so if Ohio State brings that tenacity, that mentality, that week of prep into Iowa, they would win by 30 points. That's just from the neck up, in my opinion. That much can change. Maybe not necessarily the same in pro sports. I think in pro sports you don't have much of a confidence or a huge letdown game in professional sports, and you can have it obviously in an 82-game season where the Cavs lose to whatever team, or Golden State randomly loses one to I can't even think of a team, the Suns, on a random Tuesday, because they don't care. They're not giving it 100%, and that's exactly what happened here. I just think, in short, after that long rant, that mentally and what happens throughout the week and even during a game, to start a game especially, from the neck up and how you approach it, I think matters a lot more in sports than we think, and that's why Vegas makes money, because we think we know what a bunch of 18, 19, 20-year-old kids are going to do on every single Saturday, and we don't. We really don't. That's why Vegas makes their money. Obviously, nobody thought Iowa was going to win this game by 30 points, but I just had to bring that in, that mentally and from the neck up, it means a lot more than what people think. I'll move on to Michigan State, Penn State. Michigan State at home wins this game 27-24. There was a huge 2-hour, 3-hour something weather delay for rain, lightning, that kind of stuff. And by the end of it, Brian Lewerke, a sophomore quarterback from Michigan State, throws for 400 yards against Penn State. Going into last week, Penn State had the number one scoring defense. Lewerke throws for 400 yards. They hold Saquon Barkley to 63 yards rushing. Michigan State's receiver, Felton Davis, gets 180, 12 catches against a really strong defense. It's just something you don't think happens as far as how it played out. And Michigan State only won the game by 3 points. This is kind of the mold that I thought Iowa would beat Ohio State if Iowa were to win, that Iowa would have to play really well and Ohio State would play poorly, and Iowa would win, like you said, Troy, by 3, 7, 10 points. And that's how it would play out, not a 31-point shellacking that Iowa did. But Michigan State gets it done, 27-24. Defense holds strong. You get strong quarterback play from Lewerke. This is a young team that you mentioned it before, Troy. They're completely exceeding expectations. And so to the doubters of D'Antonio, I mean, the proof is in the pudding that he knows what he's doing. He's proved it over the years. Just because he has one bad season with one young team doesn't necessarily mean that he should be fired. This year, with still a young team, a sophomore quarterback, young players on the defense, they can beat the number 7 team in the country, and they can be 7-2 and be the number 12 team in the country going into week 11 of the season. I think D'Antonio knows what he's doing. I think hats off to Michigan State and their young team. They're only going to just keep getting better. Not to say that, obviously they're national championship bound a year or two from now, but this team is gaining valuable experience, and they're showing talent-wise that they're not insanely far off from the Ohio States, Penn States of the world, because they're showing that on any given Saturday it can be done, that they can win like they did this past weekend.
Yeah, and we're going to preview later. They've got another tough matchup next week, and it's for all the marbles, to be honest. The winner of that game has complete control of that division to play in the Big Ten championship game. But I'm going to tell you what, I'm going to keep it short on Michigan State. You had a good in-depth analysis of that game. The weather delay, to me, I think probably played into Michigan State's favor. You have a break like that, and I've heard some comments about, food, and I don't know how much truth there is to that, but what Michigan State did during the break. But those breaks, and I've had those also as an athlete, and they suck. They're terrible because you warm up, you get ready to play, you have to get off the field, you go into a locker room, and there's no room. And I know these facilities are big, and you get up, but there's no room. And you've totally now ruined the whole routine that you are used to. And you got to get yourself up again. And so that played right into Michigan State's hands. You got Penn State, dominant team, one of the top teams in the country. You got Michigan State. It's that little team there with something to prove. They're probably all fired up. They're probably staying focused, whereas Penn State, they're like, let's just get back on the field and get this game going. But Michigan State, they're sitting there going, man, yeah, we want to get back on the field too, but it's like, well, we can rejuvenate. We can re-energize. Let's get out there. And I'm not saying that played into it again, because it's a lot of, woulda, coulda, shouldas, but I think that weather played into Michigan State's hands. But again, at the top of this, I said sarcastically, if you wanted to fire D'Antonio and you were on that bandwagon, stay on the bandwagon. Don't get off. Fire him. Fire D'Antonio now. I made this comment to somebody I work with, Kevin. If I was D'Antonio at the end of this year, I would put my name in the hat for any big-time job out there and say, screw you, Michigan State. I know he loves it there and he's not going to do that, but that's what I would do. And I'd be like, take that, boosters. You wanted me gone? I'm gone. I'm out of here. Buy my contract out and let me go, because I don't want to be here with you hypocrites. That's what I'll call them. So if there's any boosters of Michigan State listening in, I'm sorry, but that's what you are. You wanted him gone, and look what he's doing. That's all I got.
Yeah, I'll move on. Wisconsin beat Indiana 45-17 at Indiana. Wisconsin holds Indiana to 17 points, and Jonathan Taylor runs for 183 yards, and that's
only
Wisconsin.
183. Come on, Taylor. Wisconsin. Why not 200?
Yeah. Very, very disappointing. But that's Wisconsin football. And second half, they win at 31-7. Only 14-10 at half, but eventually Wisconsin pulls away. The offensive line ends up dominating, tiring out the defensive line of Indiana, and just storybook Wisconsin this year. And that's I don't have much else to say about it.
Can you recite the stats for Mr. Hornibrook?
I can. 13 of 20, which would be 65%, I believe. 6.5 out of 10. Yeah. Math makes sense there. 65% completion percentage, only 158 yards, 2 touchdowns, 1 pick. I'm assuming I did not watch any of the game, to be honest with you, or the listeners, but only 20 pass attempts, averaging 8 yards an attempt, threw a couple touchdowns, completed 65% of his passes. I'm assuming he could play off Jonathan Taylor carrying it 29 times for 183 yards, and it was a fairly easy day against an average defense for Hornibrook.
Yeah, and I wanted you to do that because I know I've been on the young man. But again, this is against a mediocre team. And when you look at those stats, you don't need him to be much better than that.
Right.
But again, my concern here is, can he stretch the field? Can he stretch the field anywhere? My answer is no. This would have been a great opportunity, and I know you don't want to do that because it looks like you're then rubbing the score. And they had their way offensively with the run game, and that's the way it works. But, again, you have a quarterback here. I mean, what is the yards per attempt there, Kevin? Like 7.5.
Yeah,
8 yards. I mean, it's better than normal that he has, but again, it's against mediocre defense, and he still threw a pick. So yeah, I'm still a little bit critical of this guy because, like you said about a 2-loss team, prove it to me. I need him to prove it to me against a good defense, and I just don't think he has it. So I know I mentioned, Wisconsin could be undefeated out of the playoff. I'm still riding my guns that Wisconsin's not a playoff team. And it's because they're limited on offense. Jonathan Taylor, I sarcastically joked, only 183 yards. So that's a great day on the ground. But look who you did it against. You should have done that. And again, I wanted you to recite Hornibrook's numbers because you look at those numbers against a mediocre defense, and those are mediocre numbers against a mediocre defense.
Yeah.
So what is he going to do against a good defense? That's what scares me about Wisconsin. When somebody shuts down Taylor, what's going to happen? That's all I got on that game.
Yeah, people were talking about the NFL. I don't remember what show I was watching, but you have a team like Jacksonville. And Jacksonville this year even, Jacksonville's better than what most people think, but they're still a fairly average team. You've got limited quarterback play. You've got Fournette, who can obviously run it. And you've got a top-ranked defense, basically, in Jacksonville, for those that don't know. And they're still what are they, like 5-4 or something, 4-3, something like that. That's what Jacksonville is. 5-3, I think they are. I think they're tied with Tennessee. I think they're both 5-3. But so that's an above-average football team. They're not great. You got limited quarterback play. And so that's kind of exactly how I see Wisconsin. You've got limited quarterback play. You've got great running. You've got a great defense. But if Fournette and that offense can't get it going early and you're down by 10 points, do you trust Blake Bortles to get him back in? Do you trust the defense to just hold tight and not know if they have to defend the run or the pass instead of just pinning their ears back with a lead and being able to run Fournette into the ground? It's a completely different story for Jacksonville. That's why they've lost 3 games. So Wisconsin, 9-0, they're still the number 8 team in the country, according to the College Football Playoff Committee, and I think that's about right. I think you've got a really good running game, a really good defense, suspect quarterback play, and again, can the quarterback do it when he needs to? That's the point Troy basically brings up every single week, and it's true. It's 100% accurate. That's how I see Wisconsin. They're like a better version of the Jaguars in comparison to college football, because the NFL and college football is obviously not a perfect comparison. But in short, that's kind of how I see Wisconsin. I'll move on with that 28-point win on the road against Indiana. To move on, there were 4 other games in the Big Ten, and there was one, well, actually a couple. I'm curious to get your take, Troy, on one of these in particular. But I'll start with this, that Purdue was at home against Illinois. And Purdue, Illinois, Purdue is at home. And Purdue is Purdue. I think they're a very mediocre team in the Big Ten. I don't think they're of the same level of an Iowa, a Michigan State, a Northwestern in terms of talent. I think they're a little bit below, but at the same time, I think they're a bit above a Rutgers and Illinois. And so you put Purdue at home, and Purdue at home against Illinois should result in a Purdue victory. It did. They win the game 29-10. In the first half, by halftime, Purdue's only up 13-10. But in the second half, they win it 16-0, hence the 19-point differential. I don't have necessarily a ton on this game, but, just in short, Purdue basically takes care of business against Illinois. Purdue's at home. The second half goes completely Purdue's way. I think Illinois is still super young. I think they lost Mike Epstein, their freshman running back, who showed a lot of flash to start the year, to a season-ending injury, which sucked for him, for Illinois, for the growth of that program, the backfield in particular. But Purdue gets the job done. I don't have a ton more on this. But, again, Purdue at home against Illinois, they should win the game. They did. They took care of business.
Yeah, that's just right there, Kevin. Purdue against Illinois. Illinois, we've talked about it week in and week out. The growing pains with young guys. What is it, seven starting freshmen? Is that what we said?
At least.
They
at least.
And maybe more now as their season is basically, no hope to go to any postseason play. And I like Lovie Smith. I like what he's doing there. He's letting young guys play and get experience. Sometimes my old man stubborn ways, I will say, getting thrown into the fire is not the way to learn, but I think it's a little bit different in college. I think the valuable reps that these guys are getting together as a unit. This is not a single player. These are a group of guys on a defensive unit or an offensive unit that are getting valuable reps that are going to be the core of this program 2, 3, 4 years down the road. And Lovie Smith knows what he's doing. But, Purdue, just on paper, they're more talented. They proved it on the football field. It's just tough going for Illinois right now. You go out and you watch them play. They play hard. They're going to go out and play hard. They're just limited where they're at. One maturity level, we talked about from the neck up. When you're a young college guy, you don't have all those experiences that you have as a junior or senior. And that's where Illinois is at. They've not faced a lot of adversity. They're getting their butts whooped. It's tough. But, Purdue got the win. Now we can move on.
Rutgers at home against Maryland. This is the one I thought I'd get a comment from you on, Troy. Rutgers at home against Maryland. Maryland, again, down to their third-string quarterback. You can't expect too much. But at the same time, Rutgers wins the game. They win the fourth quarter by 14 points. They win the game 31-24. Rutgers, when it mattered most, beat Maryland by double digits, and they won the game. Rutgers is 3-3 in the Big Ten, 4-5 overall, but 3-3 in this best conference of college football, that Troy and I call it. And Rutgers is right there in the middle of things, being 3-3. I don't think Rutgers is necessarily a middle-of-the-road Big Ten team, but they've proven it 3 times this year. They had never done it twice in their history in the Big Ten prior to this season, but they've proved it 3 times that they can beat a Big Ten team in a single season. I don't necessarily take a ton from it, other than I don't think Rutgers is a doormat like maybe we thought coming into this year. They've proved me wrong anyway, as far as the talent gap between, I guess, the lesser middle teams like the Illinois, the Purdue's, the huge talent gap, not necessarily huge, but the obvious talent gap that I thought was there, I don't think it is there. And so I'll say that about Rutgers. I don't know if they're getting a lot better. I don't think recruiting is necessarily showing in terms of the guys that they're getting, that they're, pulling 4 stars here and there. They're not. But on Saturdays, they're playing with these other mediocre Big Ten teams, and they can easily get the job done. They've proved it 3 times. I don't think Rutgers is a doormat. That's my main takeaway from this game. Basically not the game in general at all, but Rutgers as a whole in the Big Ten for football purposes.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, Kevin. There's no need to actually get into the ins and outs of this game. It's Rutgers versus Maryland. It's a football game, but I'm going to tell you what, Rutgers being 3-3 in the Big Ten, you talk about recruiting, this is going to help the recruiting tremendous.
Yeah.
You think about where they're at in relation to Maryland, those teams are probably recruiting the same type guys. And so now you got bragging rights. Well, we beat Maryland. Why are you looking to go to Maryland? We're right there. We're in the middle of the Big Ten. We just need to add some quality players, and maybe we can, get into a decent bowl game. Maybe we can finish near the top. Maybe we can catch lightning in a bottle one year. They're doing things, and when you look at it, they surprised me. If you had told me this 6 games into the season that Rutgers was 3-3 in the middle of that division, I would have laughed at you. Then, what are you smoking?
Right.
Because there's no way Rutgers is going 3-3. No way Rutgers is getting 3 wins in the Big Ten. And they're not done yet. I mean, they are limited, of course, but for them, those 3-star recruits, those borderline 3-4s, I'll tell you what, this season is going to do wonders for them recruiting, because they can add some legitimate reasons as to why to come to Rutgers. Come here. You can play as a young guy. You're not going to have to sit on the bench for 2 or 3 years. You can help build something special. I've been on the recruiting trail many times, youngster, and I'll tell you what, programs like that, some kids just want to play. Some kids want to be a big fish in a little pond, and that's what they'd be at Rutgers. It wouldn't surprise me, not for next year's class, but for the class of 2019, and you know how much I love verbal commitments. I just love them. They're great. I love verbal commitments. Mark my word that in 2019, Rutgers is going to get a 4-star recruit. They're going to get one because of this year. Because you're going to get the kid that is the big fish in a little pond in high school, that they're going to get some good D1 offers, but Rutgers is going to come knocking, and then now they can be a big fish in the little pond at the college level, playing right into the ego. And there's nothing wrong with that. That's how some kids are built, and that's going to land Rutgers a 4-star guy. And they can now do it. They can back it now. Before it was just all talk, like come be the man on campus. Come be the man for our program. Now they're winning games. It's legitimate now. Mark my word, 2019 youngsters, Rutgers is going to land some 4-star recruits.
It's funny because a week ago I talked about me and my job and doing stuff with the Big Ten at Land of 10. If you're a Big Ten fan, check out landof10.com. I do some stuff on there. There are a number of legitimate reporters, beat writers, stuff that we do at Land of 10. And I forgot this until we brought up Rutgers recruiting, that a week ago I wrote a story about how Rutgers flipped a commit from IMG Academy. I don't know if you know that program, Troy, down here in Florida. They basically are a college high school team, basically, is what it is. It's a bunch of kids. It's a prep school, basically, to play football and get scholarships in college football. That's basically what IMG Academy is. It's a high school, but it's basically a college factory. That's what it's become over the last 5 or so years. So you've got basically 10 top 100 recruits every single year coming out of this team down here in Florida. But so Rutgers actually a week ago, this kid Archer Sitkowski is a 6'5", 4-star quarterback for the class of 2018. This is next year. Rutgers got his commitment a week ago, and he was originally committed to the Miami Hurricanes. So this is a number 5 rated pro-style quarterback from a week ago by 247 Sports, who's a legitimate, recruiting site. This is a legitimate prospect. Number 5 pro-style quarterback, class of 2018, flips his commitment from Miami of Florida to Rutgers. That happened a week ago. So Rutgers, he is from New Jersey. But you're giving this kid a reason. You're giving Northeast kids a reason to say, hey, you can play in the best conference in college football, arguably, in the Big Ten. You can stay near home in the Northeast, play for Rutgers, and you can win games here. Without you, we're going 500 in Big Ten play, and people think we're a laughingstock. With you, obviously, we're going to be able to compete. That's what they obviously preached to this kid, Sitkowski. And so a 4-star quarterback who is coming from this factory of IMG Academy in Florida and committed to Miami, who is undefeated right now, there's no reason he should decommit from Miami right now. Mark Richt, in his second, third year at Miami, undefeated, way ahead of schedule for his outlook on the program. That's a top 10 team right now. And they just lost a 4-star quarterback to Rutgers. That happened a week ago. I just figured I'd bring that up before I move on, Troy.
Yeah, isn't that great? That verbal commitment, decommit, verbal commitment, decommit. No, but it goes to prove my point that Rutgers can legitimately go out and recruit players. They're not going to get the top-end athlete, but that's still a great find, because you brought up a very good point, Kevin, that if you're from that New Jersey area, from the Northeast, you don't have to go across the world to get your chance. And especially as a young guy and a good player, you're going to play. You're not going to get buried on the depth chart. And you're not going to go 0-13. So, that's one of the things. And if they can land a few of those recruits, I'm not saying Rutgers is going to be the next power in the Big Ten, but heck, if they can hang around the middle of the pack, that's respectable. And being able to go, I'm sure that athletic department would jump head over heels. And if I offered them today 8-4 records, 8-5 records, going to a bowl game for 5 straight years, they would take that in a heartbeat at Rutgers. And that's what they're on the verge of right now, Kevin.
Yeah, and we did not think so at the start of the year. Complete 180 from at least what I thought. I'll move on. Northwestern, Nebraska. Northwestern on the road here, and this is a game we disagreed on, Troy. It was certainly not a lock of the week. You liked Nebraska, and this ended in overtime. So, I'm not going to get my panties in a bunch here about picking Northwestern to win this game. They did in overtime at Nebraska because I just thought they were the better team, and I thought they would prove it with all the crap going on in Nebraska around the program. You had made a bunch of legitimate points why Nebraska should win this game, but it was 2 mediocre teams in the Big Ten. Anything can happen. We just, pick different sides. Again, it ends in overtime. 2 of Northwestern's last 4 games have ended in overtimes. They've won all 4 of them, both overtimes, obviously. So Northwestern's winning games close. They're getting it done. They're 6-3 now, 4-2 in the Big Ten, number 25 in the college football playoff rankings. Northwestern.
That makes them bowl eligible, doesn't it? Does that make them bowl eligible?
You can be 5-7 and be bowl eligible. So they're 6-3. They're doing just fine. They're going to be making a bowl this year.
For those listening in that have never listened to this show before, I have a problem with the word bowl eligibility. That's why I bring it up. I am not being serious. I am being very sarcastic when I say that. But Northwestern is now probably bowl eligible, Kevin.
Yeah, and they were a week ago. Not a ton, I guess I'm going to say, from this game, realistically. It's 2 mediocre teams. I'm not going to get in depth with it, especially for how long we've already gone, over an hour and 15 minutes now on this podcast. But Clayton Thorson doing decent things at Northwestern, actually threw a couple picks in this game, so he didn't have a great game. But Justin Jackson, the program leading rusher, which I say basically every week, 30 carries on the ground, 150 yards. We talked about it a week ago, Troy, that you shouldn't be counting overtime stats. This was 1 overtime period, so you couldn't inflate your stats too much with a 25-yard field. But they got things going on the ground. They did what they needed to do on the road. Hats off to Northwestern, and they're ranked number 25. They're winning games close. They're one of the upper echelon middle-tier teams in the Big Ten is kind of how I put it. I guess I've got nothing more on this game in particular.
Yeah, I think you hit it on the head. They're one of those teams in that middle group that should be near the top of that middle group. And they flex their muscles. Yeah, I thought Nebraska at home, there was some legitimate reasons why I thought they could win. But you hit it right on the head. It's 2 mediocre teams in the middle of the pack. And Nebraska, their woes just continue. They continue, and there's probably going to be some major changes at Nebraska at the end of this year.
Yes, there will be. Michigan, Minnesota is the last one for the Big Ten week. Big Ten Week 10. I was going to say that's wrong, but it's correct. Big Ten Week 10. Michigan, Minnesota, Michigan at home. They win the game 33-10. You can't take much out of that. But we were curious to see how Brandon Peters, the redshirt freshman quarterback, would do. He threw 8. He completed 8 of 13 passes for 56 yards. He was the only quarterback for Michigan to throw a pass. So it's not as though it was split. That was his final stat line for Michigan quarterback. 8 of 13 for 56 yards. Threw a touchdown, no picks. You can't necessarily ding them. But as far as average per attempt, barely over 4 yards an attempt. You did not learn much about Brandon Peters. What you did, I guess you didn't necessarily learn it. We knew this, but Karan Higdon for Michigan, 16 carries, 200 yards, 2 touchdowns in this game. Chris Evans, another Michigan running back, 13 carries, 191 yards, 2 touchdowns. Between the 2 running backs, 391 yards, 4 touchdowns. That's the story of the game. Michigan just completely dominated them on the ground. Obviously did not have to do anything from a passing game standpoint. Michigan flexed their muscles on the ground and defensively, which is exactly what you would kind of expect from Michigan in this game at home against Minnesota.
Yeah, it would have been nice if they would have let him get some throws in, but they didn't have to. Again, it's kind of like what I said with Hornibrook from Wisconsin. You play against a mediocre defense, and it's a great practice time, but then people are going to say, well, why did you keep heaving the ball around the field? You were in control of this game. And Michigan had their way. Michigan, I've said this a number of times on this show, similar to Wisconsin in the fact that you got good defense, you've got a good running game, and you've got mediocre quarterback play, but we wanted to see what Peters could do. He wasn't asked to do much, and that's the way the game plan was. And honestly, it falls into the same hands of Wisconsin. If you don't need your quarterback to do too much, probably means you're winning. If Peters is throwing the ball 25 times, Michigan's probably coming from behind. Michigan is in that mold right now, similar to Wisconsin, Kevin, where they want to pound the ball on the ground, play good defense, control the clock, and wear you out. And that's what Michigan did. And I think the youngster may be on mute.
Yes, you are very correct. With that, we can move on to Week 11 of the Big Ten. And some of these lines for these games are very interesting. I'm going to go in a random order here, but Northwestern is at home to Purdue, and Northwestern is favored by 4.5. To me, that seems low. I expect Northwestern to win this game for sure. Almost willing to put a lock of the week on it. I'll be interested to see your take here, Troy, I guess. I would take Northwestern and the points there. I expect Northwestern to win the game by more than 4.5. They should be able to play solid defense. They should be able to run Justin Jackson. They should win this game. It's a night game at home. They're the better team. It's nationally televised on ESPN2. I think Northwestern is going to completely show up, and they should beat a Purdue team that's just not as good. That's my take on it.
Lock it up! Lock it up. I'd take Northwestern straight up to win anyway. I know they're given 4.5. I think they win by more than a touchdown. So, yeah, let's lock it up. I mean, Northwestern, you put these two on paper. Purdue can do some things. But I think Northwestern defensively and what they're going to do offensively, like you said, they're going to run the ball. And Purdue will give up the yards, and Northwestern will be in complete control of this game. Could be a double-digit win. I take Northwestern, give the points. This is a lock. First game right there. Lock it up, youngster.
I love it. That's our fourth one on this show. We are 3-0. Again, we are 100% on our Vegas picks on this show as a team together. I'll move on to Michigan and Maryland. Michigan is away at this one. They're traveling to Maryland. They're still favored by 17 points, though. I cannot necessarily pick one way or another with Maryland because they are on their third-string quarterback. Michigan should win the game, in my opinion, by over 17, but that's a fairly big number for a team that has no real quarterback play. And on the road, I can't go one way or another on this. Michigan should win the game, though, for sure.
And I was just following your suit. I was on mute. I didn't want to interrupt you. So I had to get off mute there. I'm with you. Michigan's going to win the game, but given 17 points on the road, Michigan's going to, like I just said, they're going to ask their quarterback not to do anything. And that's the thing. If you're not going to ask your quarterback to do anything, can you beat a team on the road by more than 17? That's a lot of points. I think Michigan wins. I would not, if I was betting, would not take Michigan. So maybe, I would take Maryland in the points if you're listening in. But again, I'm the old man, so that means you want to probably take Michigan and the points.
Fair enough.
Hard to give the points.
I'll move on to Nebraska, Minnesota. Kind of going from least interesting to interesting here is my method of madness this week. Both teams 4-5. Nebraska at Minnesota. Minnesota's favored by 2.5. These are two mediocre teams. I think Nebraska's probably a little better. I would pick Nebraska to win the game. I would not pick it as a lock, though. Nebraska winning on the road against another middle of the tier middle-tier Big Ten program. I'm not going to lock that up, but I do think, I guess, Nebraska pulls the upset in this one at Minnesota. I just think they're a slightly better team this year, and not much more to it than that.
Well, and I know I purely jinxed the Gopher fans, so I apologize. When I said they're going to play hard, they're going to play tough, they're tough at home, throw all that out the window. Now, ever since I've said that, they've kind of pooed the bed. So this is one of those coin flip games for me. And honestly, I look at it, and I could probably change my mind 5 times. And this is just going to come down to who can protect the ball better. Is it going to be Minnesota? Is it going to be Nebraska? Neither of them play great defense. So whoever turns the ball, I'll just put it this way, whoever turns the ball over the least amount of times, that's who wins the game.
Yeah, very fair. Indiana traveling to Illinois. I'm surprised Indiana's favored on the road by 9.5 points. But I think they are a 10-point better team than Illinois. They just have not proved it whatsoever this year, other than the first half against Ohio State. But both teams 0-6 in Big Ten play. One of them will surely get there first. I'm kind of rooting for Illinois because I like Lovie Smith in general, and I think he's doing good things there, and I want to see him keep his job. There's no reason why he should be fired for a bad year at Illinois, like every other coach has done for the last however long. But in general, I think Indiana should win this game as they're favored by 9.5. I'd probably take Illinois in the points if I have to, but I would not be willing to lock one way or the other for this one.
Oh, you're not gonna make it another lock for us. Hey, guess what, Lovie Smith? The old man's in your corner. I think you get your first Big Ten win today or Saturday. I'm taking Illinois in this one, youngster.
Ooh,
so,
okay.
Yeah, I'm taking Illinois. I like the tenacity they play with. I know Indiana's got a much better offense, but again, you got to remember, I'm a Badger fan. I watch the Badgers against these teams. Illinois was given, and again, I know offensively, okay, it's Wisconsin. But I kind of like what's going on defensively with Illinois. I think they can do some things. I give the edge offensively, of course, to Indiana. But I think Illinois can create some turnovers. And I think at home creating turnovers, we talked about it with Iowa and Ohio State. If Illinois can do that and build off that momentum, I'm thinking that Illinois gets their first Big Ten win. Lovie Smith can get a Gatorade shower, keep his job. Even if he didn't win a Big Ten game, I say he still keeps his job. But come on, Lovie, this is the one. This is the one. I'm picking you on our show to win right now. So go, Lovie Smith. Go Fighting Illini. Pick an Illinois youngster.
Yeah, I don't pick them to win. I would pick them to cover, which should mean a lock. I just don't feel 100% comfortable with it. So we are sticking with one for now going forward. Northwestern minus 4.5 at home against Purdue. But we'll move on. Rutgers travels to Penn State. That basically, we talked up Rutgers. We talked about, we were kind of recruiting experts for Rutgers there for about 10 minutes on the show earlier. But Penn State's favored by 31, as they should be. Realistically, especially after losing 2 games in a row, you play at home against a Rutgers team that you're just miles better than, realistically, from a talent perspective. So I could see this one getting ugly. I think 31 points is a lot, but especially with how it's coming off and how Rutgers is kind of happy to be 3-3, and then you go on the road and you play a pissed-off Penn State team, I could see it getting ugly. So I'm not going to go one way or another on a 31-point spread, but obviously Penn State should win this one pretty comfortably.
Yeah, that's a lot of points, but Penn State's capable of doing it against Rutgers. But if I had to take my Monopoly money and call up somebody to put a bet down, I don't know if I could take. I just don't know if I could take that 31 points. That's a lot. That is a lot of points. Penn State's going to win this game with ease, but I don't know if they're doing it by 31.
Yeah, fully agree. I believe we have just 2 games left here. Yes. I'll start with this, I guess being an Ohio State homer, so to say. We'll start with Iowa, Wisconsin. Iowa travels to Wisconsin. Iowa coming off a 31-point victory over Ohio State. You would think that there would be more love for Iowa, and yet Wisconsin's at home. They're favored by 12.5 points. Kind of as it should be. I think you can see Wisconsin winning this game by 10 or 14, hence the 12.5-point line. That's how I see it anyway. I think Vegas hits it perfectly there, right in the middle. Wisconsin should win the game. They're the better team. They're at home. It's a bigger game for Wisconsin for the first time this year, basically. So they're going to show up, especially at home, again, against a team who's coming off a 31-point win over Ohio State. You know Wisconsin is going to be mentally ready. I think they prove it. I think Iowa can absolutely win the game, just like they proved against Ohio State. But Wisconsin at home, and from a mentality standpoint, for what's above the neck in this one, I expect Wisconsin to take care of business, whether it's by 10 points, 14, 17, I don't know. So I'm not going to lock it one way or another with that spread total. But Wisconsin wins the game here, and I don't think it's going to be insanely close, but I think it'll be within 14. I'll say that much.
Well, here's the thing: I never take the points in Wisconsin because I just don't know what I'm going to get offensively. Iowa proved last week that they can shut down a running game. Is this the game that Hornibrook proves to me that he can actually go out and win a game? Maybe it might be, because when you look at it, they shut down Barkley. And I'm not saying that Barkley is better than Taylor or Taylor is better than Barkley. Iowa proved that they can shut down a top-notch running game. I would give the edge in the offensive line to Wisconsin if I'm comparing Penn State to Wisconsin. So let's see if Iowa can do it 2 weeks in a row. I don't think they can. But offensively, again, outside of that, if they do shut them down, this game scares me a little bit, Kevin, in the fact that Iowa just proved that they could beat a team that I think is better than Wisconsin. But I think Wisconsin's going to eke this out because it's at home.
Yeah, fair enough. You would pick, if you had your monopoly money, you would take Iowa getting 12.5 points, though?
Yeah, I definitely would.
Yeah. Understandable. It's a big number for Wisconsin against a pretty good team, obviously. Not much more to say, at least on my end for that one. I could see it going either way from a, I guess, football perspective. But again, I think what's between the ears, I think all favors Wisconsin in this one, and being at home is a big difference in my opinion. Ohio State at home against Michigan State. Number 12 versus number 13. Ohio State, I'm curious as to what you think the line is for this one, Troy. Ohio State at home against Michigan State.
Oh, let's see here. I'm going to say Ohio State by 4.5.
Ohio State by 15.5 is what you were looking for there.
Oh, yeah. I was just a little bit off.
It's insane to me, Troy, how much the, I guess, general public and Vegas sees Ohio State and how good they are, because before the year started, I mean, Ohio State was big favorites over teams like Penn State, big favorites to get to the college football playoff, big favorites to win the Big Ten in general. They were huge favorites. I mean, they were like supposed to be the second best team in the country, according to Vegas. And it almost still seems that way because you're at home against the number 12 team in the country and you're favored by 15.5 after you just lost by 30. I mean, it makes no sense to me from that perspective. And I talk in particular about Vegas lines and how much the week before, the game before, matters in influencing the line following it. And so you would think Michigan State, after an upset win over Penn State, you would think Ohio State losing by 30 points the week prior, you would think it would matter a little bit, but it almost seems like it's going the opposite way, probably assuming Michigan State is coming off this high at home, beating Penn State. Now you travel to play Ohio State, who Ohio State kind of dominated Penn State, again, outside of the first 3 minutes of the game. So Michigan State on the road after a big win, Ohio State at home after a shocking dismantling loss. Maybe that's where Vegas is thinking, and the line always moves as the week goes along, as bettors hit the game, but it doesn't ever move by a ton. To me, this is a lot of points. Like you probably thought, Troy, in saying, Ohio State by 4.5, I would have said probably by a touchdown, maybe, but 15.5 is a lot. I would take Michigan State in the points here. Probably so do you. I can see Michigan State coming off, again, mentally, Michigan State coming off a huge win, going on the road, playing a pissed-off Ohio State team, wanting to prove that they are one of the top teams in the country again, coming off a big loss on the road, coming back home, playing a Michigan State team who they know they're better than. I think they believe that, and being ranked behind Michigan State, I think Urban Meyer can get his kids fired up for that aspect of it as well. Prove to the country that you're way better than the number 12 team in the country. We know we are. Let's prove it after that poor performance a week ago. So I can see Ohio State winning by 17 points. I'm not willing to lock this one way or the other. I think we have our one lock of the week. But 15.5 against Michigan State is a lot of points this year.
Yeah, I don't care if Ohio State's operating on all cylinders. We've got to give Michigan State some credit at some point. Granted, we're not considering them one of the elite teams in the Big Ten, but that's a lot of points. And you're playing against a Michigan State team that has everything to play for. They did it last week. I think for anything, Michigan State, it gave them more confidence to go into this game like, you know what? We can beat Ohio State. And right. I think Ohio State's going to have their hands full. If they would have lost, if Michigan State would have lost to Penn State, it would have been, I wonder what the line would have been at that point. Would it have been like 28? Because they just beat Penn State. And you're going to favor Ohio State by 15 or 15.5, whatever the line is. I think it's too much. I think Ohio State wins the game. Could they win by 30? Oh, sure enough, they could. Like we talked about, the offense before last week was playing very well. They had a bad day. And part of that is they kept turning the ball over. But Michigan State has a defense, too, that's pretty tenacious when it comes to creating turnovers. So what happens if Ohio State turns the ball over? Now, Ohio State's at home, so it's a little bit different. But I think Ohio State's going to win this game, but I don't think they win by 16, Kevin. I think they're going to win maybe by 10 or 14, but I don't think they win by more than 15.5. I don't think they cover that spread, but I think they will win the game.
Yeah, same here. I think that Michigan State's defense is being not respected enough. That's kind of my take with this and that line. I guess that's my final take on the game. I expect Ohio State to win like you by probably 10 or 14 points. I could see it, again, being ugly just because of how it can play out talent-wise and at home and after a huge embarrassing loss and being ranked behind Michigan State. I think all of that factors in. But, again, 15.5 points, you got to prove it to me, Ohio State, after losing by 30, that you deserve to be favored by 15.5 over Michigan State, who's done everything except let people down this year. They have just proven people wrong, and I think they can very well do it again. I'm just not going to lock it, unfortunately. But so our lock of the week, Northwestern minus 4.5 at home against Purdue. We're assuming the better team wins at home by at least 5 points. I think that's pretty safe. That's why we think it's a lock. That's it. I mean, I'm done for this week. An hour 40 minutes in. Troy, as I'm speaking, it's been a long one. It's been a fun one. It's been an interesting one to talk about all the madness that happened a week ago and how it affects the college football playoff going forward. I think we talked about a lot of good stuff on this show. I guess I will hand it over to you. And personally, I guess I'll see all the listeners next week.
Yeah, we will see all the listeners next week. Got to preface a couple things here at the end, some housekeeping. So for those that have made it this far, that means that you must be intrigued by what Kevin and I have to say, and you're hanging on every word that we say. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. Find us on Twitter, TroyRobert967, or at KidCunny, KIDCUNI, or our show handle, at Youngster Old Man. Can't screw that one up. Youngster Old Man, all one word. Go there. Find us, follow us, interact with us. Second thing, this has been Big Ten football. Big Ten basketball right around the corner. Kevin and I have decided to do a separate Big Ten basketball show, so make sure that you keep tuning into the Grueling Truth. That's why you got to follow us on Twitter, so you find out when our basketball show is going to be posted on the Grueling Truth. Also, if you like the NFL, if you like the Steelers, if you like the Browns, if you like the Cavaliers, if you like the Penguins, if you like baseball, follow us on Twitter, TroyRobert967, or at KidCunny, because we also do 2 radio shows on Saturday, and we tweet the link out to listen in on Saturday morning, and then after that, we tweet the link out to listen on SoundCloud. So if you can't get enough of our wonderful voices, you've got 3 other opportunities to do it, Kevin. I just like doing shows with you, man. That's the way it comes. That's the way it rolls. We just love talking sports. That's all I have. Again, thank you for listening in. Kevin and I do appreciate it. Have a good night, everyone. We'll talk to you soon.